So it wasn't on.
I don't think the sound was on.
Here we go. Technical difficulties, everybody. Hi. Like I was saying, my name is Limbert Fabian. I'm a executive creative director at Flight School Studio, and I'm going to help out today with creating an image for Manifest 99. It's our first self-published VR experience. Flight School is a multimedia studio, and we do all kinds of really great stuff, especially in this new space. It's kind of like augmented, virtual narrative experiences, and the reason it's kind of hard to sort of explain all that, because I think it isn't just about one specific platform. It's about multiple ways to sort of tell stories, and that's what Flight School is really all about, is kind of find ways to engage a narrative with an audience, and we're going to have a lot of fun with that, and the first example of that is Manifest 99. A couple of things we could talk about really quickly. Flight School is hiring some talent. We were looking for an interactive developer specifically. We have a website, but also specifically, you can find job descriptions for that on our blog, which is blog.flightschool.studio. That is one of multiple jobs that will be popping up there as we grow the studio and do some engaging work. We're also going to be at SIGGRAPH on Sunday, part of the Playcrafting Indie Game Showcase. Exactly, which is, I'm going to look down here where it is exactly. It's in the West Hall of the Convention Center, and look for Manifest 99 set up there. And I think we will have the setup, play the experience, and actually have you be able to do it live there, which would be great. So like I said before, what I want to do today was kind of talk a little bit about creating a promotional image for Manifest, and the thing that I also wanted to think about was, how do we use the promotion of the project and anything that's ancillary, sort of pushing into the experience and finding it in engaging ways. And one of the things that we were playing with is, can we use the image in a new way? Specifically, can we augment the image? And when we talk about augmenting an image, we're talking about AR specifically. There's a bunch of ways current ways to do that, but the way that seems to be the coming way of doing that is through our mobile devices, and we wanted to think about potentially creating an image that would have a life beyond the flat 2D experience you'll get by seeing the image. So it should be a beautiful piece of art, but also can it give you something else as well? I know we're not just limited to with technology just to creating images as targets, but it just makes a lot of sense to use the image as a doorway to seeing more about the characters in the story. Specifically for me, Manifest is about character. The experience is about kind of solving the mystery of this moving train. But for me, it's like, who are you? Is one of the things I was interested in when we first started thinking about the project. And with VR and augmented experiences, and who am I? What is my input? What am I bringing to the table? So when we conceived Manifest, it was important to think about who you were as the participant in that story. And then there's characters that are sort of alive in that story. And then on top of that, the most intriguing character, of course, is our hero or anti-hero, if you want to think of it that way, in the story. And that sort of, for me, is the place I wanted to start if I was going to create imagery for it. Promotional imagery also, you don't want to give away too much. I think you want to just really entice the viewers. Creatively, that's one of the things I like to do. As a creative, as an illustrator, as an artist, I'd like to think conceptually, why am I making this image? Why does the image matter? And how does it add value to the bigger idea? So I've got a couple of things I'm going to share with you guys here. I want to show my process. Hopefully isn't too confusing. I think I've got Photoshop up here. Right, so this is crazy. My crazy mess. Actually, I have a layer called Madness Sketchbook. But yeah, these are just doodles from my sketchbook. This is how usually I tackle any image I'm creating, whether it's a beat for a story, or whether it's an illustration, or it's the storyboards. Is I try to give myself as much information I think is the main idea for the image. And if you look at my scribbles here, I jot it down. Do I want to create a character poster? I want the style to stand out since it's a promotional piece, almost like a standalone piece of art. that isn't tied to the main art and style that we have for the project. So it should feel and look different, almost like, you know, the Mondo posters that you see for films. It's kind of an alternative take on the imagery from the film or the project. So this is very similar in that regard. And then I wanted to make sure that I dialed in what I thought was the most important thing when you do the experience, and the eyes are going to be a big part of what happens in the piece. So I wanted to make sure I use the eyes as a device for my my image. So this doodle, I'll make it big so y'all can see a little better. The image, the initial sketches, the traditional approach, I think, was just like, hey, I'm going to throw everything at this thing, and it's all of the characters. Is there an image where I kind of show off who you experience and what you're talking to? This may look like a bunch of crazy little lines, but the idea is that I'm trying to compose an image that may be solved for all those characters. That led to, okay, well, let's play with our main character. And in the story, there's a character which we meet early on that is tied to the story in a very engaging way. And one of the things that you might have seen with the project is that there was a lot of iconography that we did, a lot of artwork that we did to tease the beginning of the project. And one of the things we created was a keychain that had a little keyhole sort of cut out of the keychain, and a few people got that at a couple events that we attended. It was weird to think, well, what is this thing? And all it had was the Manifest logo on Manifest 99 and on the keychain. But the keyhole itself was a design element that was really exciting for us. It began to kind of give you clues about what we're trying to do, and I'm going to call a couple of things. So the keyhole represents a few things. Go to this layer here. It makes a great graphic image. It looks like it's a skull, right? So that begins to kind of give us this ominous thing that's going on. It also is, in the context of our project, it's also an opening which acts like a portal, which is important because you're traversing the story on a train. And if we think about that as a sort of an opening in a tunnel, then that becomes an intriguing image. And then you have this great negative space. So what do you put in that negative space? One of the things that we always do is like, hey, can we silhouette a character in there? And I began to kind of think about that. Hey, so who's the main character that I might talk about and play with? The other characters in our story are these crows, which play a big part and actually ask a lot of questions, or allow you to sort of think of the story and ask questions as you experience it. And of course, to talk about mystery. But again, that felt like, okay, that might be some imagery people have seen. People have seen the keyhole. People have seen images where this beaked character, our crow boy looking character, begins to appear. Can I push a little further? And I arrived at this image. And this was intriguing to me because I can incorporate the device of the birds and take the idea of the silhouette and make that the focus of a potential image. So that led to, okay. Well, if I'm going to use this as a starting point, what if the image is meant to do something else? So you've got this potentially interesting, at least it was to me when I sketched it, this interesting concoction of a figure and some of the birds, some of the crows. What do the crows mean? We don't know anything yet. It just I wanted to make a compelling looking image that I felt was interesting. But that led to think, well, if this was somehow digitally altered, if we can kind of point our device and have an AR experience where I'm going to be able to look at this image, whenever I looked at it, I see one thing, and the image then animates and reveals something else. Could this image become this image, which shows a stylized version of one of our characters in the short, and maybe he emotes or does something and it creates a gesture and animates himself on screen on our AR enabled device. I'll call it that. So that was intriguing to me. So what I'd like to do today is I'm going to try to take this image into a realized poster image, and sort of with using my sensibilities as an artist and a designer, and see what we come up with. But I felt like this was fun, and what we'll do is try to create this this image here as a final poster. I work on paper, then to Photoshop. It's like the default digital tool. Another thing that I like to use is I work in Illustrator to refine those sketches in a more specific way. So if I go back to my sketch here and I copy and paste it into Illustrator, it creates something to work on top of. And what's cool about Illustrator is they have a fantastic brush tool that I like to mess with, because I get the quality of drawing like a regular pencil, but the best part about this is that everything I touch is now a Bezier curve, and I can mess with the image that way. So those are the two main tools I'll be using as I refine the imagery. Cool. Let's see. So what I wanted to do first is think about this image, and is there anything I can add to this to help it communicate a little bit more specifically what I wanted to do. I have a layer here that has, let's see, a couple of dots, right? So this layer, I'll explain what that is. Also, you guys, feel free to ask questions.
We actually have some questions that are in chat that you can't see, so I'll read them to you.
Okay, let's see.
Okay, so Roy Bastos wants to know, what would you say was more influential to your work? Growing Pains or 8 is Enough?
Growing Pains, for sure. I wanted him to be my dad. The Sievers were great. No, Growing Pains was a big part of my growing up. That's a great question. Who's Mark? You got someone named Market on there on Periscope? That's cool. Okay, so the image here is, that sounds like it was a Sully question. I like that. Let's see here. I've created a border, which I thought was kind of interesting, to sort of contain the main scribble of our guy. The reason I had the border is because I was thinking about where am I going to contribute graphic communication. So this might be a place to put in a logo. That'd be kind of cool here. So that becomes a place for a graphic. And then I was like, well, you know what? The story is much more than one character, so we can use these four corners to house the icons that represent other characters in the story. So that then as an image begins to sort of compile itself and kind of give me something to play with. And then again, we talked about this image, this part here being the revealed element, or vice versa. We can have this be the main image that's here, and then whenever you point your device to it, the augmented part of it, maybe the crows all roost around him, which change his silhouette. Let's see here, some questions. Oh, some folks are joining on, which is great. Some friends, familiar faces, and familiar names. Cool. If you guys are familiar with any of my work in the past, I really do love graphic and bold conceptual images, and as an illustrator, it's sort of like the focus of my work, and think of it that way. That sort of extends to how I think about story. I want to make sure that we can create universes and worlds that are chock full of detail, which is a big part of who we are. We love to craft and get really nitty-gritty details, but all of those details should be in service of a big, grander concept, and that concept should be very clear and understandable. Hopefully, if we do our jobs right, that's something that you'll be able to walk away with and go, wow, that's really great how that works. And one of the things I wanted to point out about the idea of concept is, I'm going to do something here. I'm going to draw in really quickly. It's a rough silhouette of all of these birds. And I'm going to fill it black. Oops. Filling it black. And conceptually, what I liked about this image was, I'm switching computers here and then trying to get the lay of the land. Conceptually, what I thought was interesting with this image was that it allowed for this really great space to do this constellation gag. And why constellation gag? Imagine that each little one of these lines, one of these little dots represents eyes. Again, eyes and vision plays a big part in our story. But what was also interesting about doing the eyes as a field of dots or a field of stars inside his silhouette is that I really like the idea that potentially another way to augment the image is if you look at it, each one of these each eyes becomes a connected way to sort of think about a constellation. Constellations kind of give you secondary imagery. They map out, if you map out the stars, they have these cool connections. That's important. So conceptually, that's important in the story because the eyes are a way that we are going to help the viewer engage in the story. But the eyes are also a connecting device. And I like the idea of connections being part of the image that we can potentially do here. So again, it's trying to come up with a conceptual image that looked different than we were doing, but also informed the story in a way. So then that's sort of the core concept of what I wanted to create here. Let's see here. So let's do a little bit of fun. So I'm just gonna take this image of this guy, and I'm not gonna refine it much more there. I'm gonna go into Photoshop, and I'm going to do this. Let's start him here.
So Limbert, while you're getting set up, you have another question. Who are some of the artists in all fields who've inspired you over the years?
Oh my gosh, so many artists, so many people. I'm inspired every day by my partners at work. I love my artists that I work with. I love everyone that I get to interact with every single day. It's just a joy to come to work and be able to work with everyone. And that's a big deal for me. It's just kind of be able to have a sounding board for ideas, and then be surprised with everything they bring to the table and what they do in their own craft. I mean, you guys have been, if you've watched the last couple of Twitch streams, Adam Volker's done some beautiful painting work and some beautiful ideation. And he as a director of the project brings a level of sophistication which is just gorgeous to the project. Brandon Oldenburg and I have been friends forever. Seems like all of us went to Ringling, but he and I go a long way back, and I'm always blown away by his genius and what he's bringing to the table. He made a really funny comment about us, and he's like, we're like Han Solo and Chewbacca. Obviously, Han Solo sitting right here, but he and I really are really great collaborators. But beyond that, I mean, the greats. I mean, there's. I'm inspired by filmmakers. I'm inspired by illustrators. I'm inspired by painters. When I was a young kid, I had a book that my parents gave me that was a Picasso book, and I think they picked that because he was Spanish. I'm Hispanic, and my mom was, and all things trying to support me was like, well, here's a book by a Spanish artist. You'll like this. And seeing his work was inspirational, and not just his work, but the variety of work that he was able to accomplish was a big deal for me growing up. But I was also a child of the 80s and pop culture, and I just, between comic books and spending every dollar I could at the movies was a big deal. Sci-fi films were a big part of my upbringing, so everything from Aliens and Star Wars to Blade Runner, all of the things that touch milestones, and all the Spielberg films. I think I've seen every one of them, and it's a big part of, I think, the texture of what makes me who I am. But at the same time, once I got to art school and I learned about what the different fields in art were, then I got to interested in who were the people making these conceptual images in magazines and on album covers and things like that. So there's a plethora of artists that I've admired throughout the years, and and continue to see how they grow and what they've been doing. From Brian Cronin to Anita Koons to my gosh, Matt Mahern from a long time ago. The idea of you're bending sort of technology to your needs, and you use photography and Photoshop and all these things. All of that was it's part of the soup that makes up my creative inspiration. If that helps answer that question. Let's see here. Was that a recruiting pitch? Yes, we are hiring. That's for sure. Always. The specific.
Twitch stream.
Thank you. There should be a link on the Twitch stream specifically. We're looking for a developer in our interactive side of the studio. Do I prefer to sketch on rough? Depends on how fast I need to do something. I like to sketch on paper in my sketchbook. The feel of a pen on paper is always really gratifying, and it's helpful to not make it too special. But there is a lot of times where I'm just kind of pressed for time, and just doodling on the computer makes things a little easier. So I do have a couple of preset brushes that I like to work with in Photoshop, and I'll just jump right in and work directly there. For the most part, we do all of our boarding. I do all of my storyboarding or beating out of a story digitally. I just work right on the computer just because I know I'm going to be able to cut those around and move them and replace them and get them to where they need to be. And then for my illustration work, I do jump from a sketch right into digital media as fast as I can, just so I can flesh things out, coloring and so forth. And then I just love layers. I think layers are a lifesaver. So specifically, this guy here, I'm going to start to block out what I think is interesting for me about this image. Cool. Any questions? Ron, we're looking for editors, potentially. Good to see you, bud. It's interesting. We talk about editing too. I'm glad you're on here. But editing in virtual space is interesting, and the idea of crafting a narrative in a space where you've given control to the viewer. That's an interesting dilemma to have to grapple with, and which is something that we deal with a lot with here at the studio as we think about our stories, and how we take traditional media and apply it to this new space. That's a big part of who we are. So I based this drawing on a piece of art that Brandon sculpted a few weeks ago. The gesture of the character in the jacket and the way he was wearing the outfit is based on the final design that Jake White created with Adam, and so with each one of these iterations, we're sort of interpreting what we think is the attitude of our character in the story, and I like the hang of the gesture that Brandon did. So I'm going to take that step further and create this image. All I'm doing now is I'm just creating a rough outline of these basic shapes, which I'm going to tweak later. There are a few times where I jump into this tool, and this is the reason I feel comfortable working in Illustrator this way, is because for the first 3 years of my life as an artist after graduating art school, I was fortunate enough to get an internship at a newspaper at the St. Pete Times in Florida. That was wonderful because the pace at which you had to create images was insane, working at a newspaper. But also the main tool that they used for layouts and art was Illustrator. And I just got used to making all these graphics for them, these charts and those infographics that you use and you see in newspapers. That just became sort of like the default tool for me. But I learned quickly how to use it and get comfortable with it. But the only difference was I was using a mouse. So I'm using my mouse to click around and try to draw with, which is insanely ridiculous and time consuming, until I found out this little tiny wonderful tool, which is the image trace tool, which kind of gives you a shortcut. But I kind of like to control it, so I go back to the line work myself and redraw and retrace things. So let's see, he needs a head. All right, great. So I think I have most of the shapes that I like, and I'm gonna give this guy a color. Great. Do that. Those are my basic shapes, and then I'm gonna hide my sketch for a minute. Just kind of check it against it. That looks like garbage, but let's start to make it look better. Great. So what I'm gonna do is now start giving it a little bit of flair and some love, and try to find what I thought was intriguing about the sketch and bring that back to life through this flat medium. It's funny, I took an elective in graphic design when I was studying illustration at Ringling. I always was intrigued with the idea of images being tools to communicate, and that also informs the way I've worked. You know, from early on, like I said, I wanted to be. I was influenced by film, but I always admired the fact that filmmakers are trying to tell you something about sort of the human condition, and so there was this idea that they are communicating to you in that specific medium, and then graphic design and everything from signage and how we use that sort of visual language to talk to each other was intriguing. So then that was a reason that I follow and kind of like enthralled by graphic design as a medium as well. So try to find ways to incorporate that in my work. Cool. Any questions? All right.
Nothing yet, but maybe, Lambert, can you talk a little bit about some of the graphic design stuff that you're inspired by right now?
Gosh, Liz, there's what am I inspired by right now? There is in the space, there's a lot in graphic design in general. There's a lot of really great things. I love how branding for just about any product nowadays is not taking the viewers, the audience for granted, and the smart choices being made about how people understand this visual language. I love everything from what Paul Scheer's done for example, what Pentagram's done for Shake Shack, and it's great. I mean, people are there's a sophistication level that's just there. That's just wonderful, and people get it, and I love the fact that if you go, hey, people are going to get this, and that sort of frees you up as an artist to do things that you think are interesting to you, and craft worlds that are intriguing to you. And that's what we try to do here at Flight School, is to try to create images that are interesting to us. I like what's been done there. There's I love when music and art clash together. Here's something we just saw yesterday. I saw a really great piece that Chipotle launched yesterday, where they worked with the RZA and other artists to create a sort of a synesthesia experience where they've taken every ingredient for the food and added a sound element to it. And I think I'm drawing a blank on what the name of the site is, but Savor, yes, Savor.waves. It's wonderful. It's really great. That again is I think it's a graphic design feat, but it's also one where you're tinkering with multiple technologies and experiences, and you're also doing it in a way that people are comfortable using technology in the first place. So you've got a mobile experience, you've got a desktop experience, and you're playing with sound, and you're getting these visuals, and then the whole thing is sort of packaged up for you. And all of that, it's in service of, don't forget we're a restaurant. We're talking about, hey, you get to choose your ingredients when you come to this restaurant. So conceptually, that is a wonderful piece of graphic design. You've taken the idea of the simple thing you do when you go to Chipotle, which is to order food in the way you want it. You construct your food that way, so you're constructing this music, and I thought that was a genius genius move there. I'm also giving props to our friends at CA, because they did a really great job there, and we've had experiences with them way back when we did a small little film called The Scarecrow with them. So it's great to see how that the evolution with the brand has happened. Yeah, go mix and mixes with Savor Waves. All right, so what I'm doing here is I'm doing a little. I'm planning ahead. I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm creating these little masked areas, because what I'm going to do with that is the following. I'm going to create a gradient. Black on black. Come on, color. And I'm going to the mouse here. What are you doing? All right, we'll do it old school way. I'm going to give this a color. And I'm going to tell it to do this. What I'm doing here is, that's going to be a way for me to potentially shade this image. That might be too laborious for my needs, but I think there is a potential for something interesting if I keep applying that to these shapes here. All right, cool. I think that could be turned to something later down the road. Begin to think about how lighting can start to play a role in this image. Specifically, and guys, I'm not doing like a full tutorial on how to use Illustrator, but this is how my brain works sometimes when I'm illustrating. And of course, this looks all really sterile. We're gonna fix that later.
Ron Sussman does say he's learning a lot about Illustrator.
Right now?
Yeah.
Awesome. Oddly enough, this is one of my favorite tools, but I don't use it on a daily level like I used to when I'm just illustrating. As a creative director, as an artist here, a lot of my days spent is thinking about ideas and putting them on paper. So it's turned into a lot of writing, which is wonderful. It's a tool and a skill that everyone should have. But it's just a different way of thinking. But you can't help yourself and doodle as you write. And that's a big part of my day, is to kind of sit with a book or my laptop or a blank page and just kind of jot down main ideas for the stories, and then make those be the guidelines for the images that we're going to add around that, or the direction we can give many of our talented artists, so they can start to work from something. Give them the sort of the playground for them to begin to work from. Cool. Let's see, that's interesting. All right, I'm going to do another thing here. So I think the lighting is going to make sense. And I'm going to add one more layer here. I'm going to lock that thing. And I'm going to go to this drawing tool, the brush, like I mentioned before. Now they got a bunch of preset stuff here, which is like, yeah, it's cool, it's interesting. We can mess with that later. But I like to kind of just keep it raw and simple, just the basic weighted line here as you go from a line to thick to thin. What I'm going to do here is zoom in a little bit and introduce some graphic intentional lines. Let's check my sketch where things are happening. And just gives a little bit of love here. Yeah. Any questions while I'm doing this? I'm sorry. This is the part of my brain's just taking over and going, you know, try this, try that. And everyone works different, right? Everyone has a different approach. This was interesting to me. Hope Adam and Jake like what I'm doing to their awesome crow design, crow boy design.
Lambert, tell us what is really appealing about the crow boy design. Like, what do you think that the team achieved with that character?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think what's interesting about the crow boy design. You know, what's cool about crow boy is that this character specifically, is he comes off as sort of this cloaked figure, and he's got this feels like he is hiding something about the design with the hood and the way sort of his general shape sort of feels like it feels like there's something underneath all of that's important, which kind of plays to the story in itself. Specific for me also that the silhouette that he's creating for us with the hood and what's going on here, people? And the beak is interesting as well. You know, you've got crows and the birds have a very unique sort of thing going on, and I think we're achieving that with that shape. So taking the gesture of what we know the birds do is interesting, and I thought that was really, really great, really great work on their part. And they also did a really good job of making him work from every angle. I mean, the silhouettes, and if you look at our trailer, there's a moment in the trailer where he appears. Also, if you guys notice, again, I can't wait for you guys to play the experience. But here's a crow. But look at our guy, like that's that silhouette of our main character in the middle of that train plays a big part. The nines also look like eyes, which again reinforces the idea. But they did a really great job with sort of dialing all that in with one specific figure. Let's see here. And he just looks cool. I mean, he just has this attitude about him, which is really just swanky. Swanky. People use that word still?
Yeah, why not?
All right. So I'm going to just kind of goof this up a little bit. And I'm going to add some of that shadowing. Thanks, Ron. go to our shortcuts. Madness. So what this then does is I'm getting skew him back a little bit. He's leaning. He's leaning a little bit. All right, cool. So it's our main guy. I'm gonna do one more thing before we go back to Photoshop to have some fun. Is I want to add some of those eye elements that we talked about in the constellation. We'll use this later. Let's see. Here. Have you guys seen Baby Driver? Can I talk about movies for a minute?
Tell us all about Baby Driver. I haven't seen it yet. No spoilers.
No spoilers. Dang it. Well, it's a really great movie. Someone explained it as it's a musical where the car chases are the songs. And it's just wonderful. They're really great stuff. It's one of the coolest things out this summer for sure. Let's see what else we've seen lately. You know, I've got to respect these guys that get on here and play games and talk to an audience while they're playing a game. So kudos to all you Twitch masters out there. What does this all mean? You know, it's just interesting that when you think of it, virtual experiences and or augmented experiences, like there's only so much you can like talk about without people just, you know, without giving it away. And I'm holding myself back because I want to talk really in depth about the, you know, the reason behind what we did, but it's something that you want to preserve for an audience to experience, and you want them to find out and figure out, because that's what's what's great about virtual reality is you're injecting yourself, even though there's a set of rules for you. You are injecting yourself to a story, into a story. So to some extent, there's a level of choice that you're bringing to the table, or allowing the audience to have, and I think that it's something we want to preserve. And at the very minimum, we think it's beautiful, and I think people are gonna like it. And as the tools get more sophisticated and the experiences and the way we make these things keep evolving, it's just allowing us to sort of up our craft game. What's that? Grobo's from space. Yes. No, he's not from space. You know, everything's connected, and that's important in the story. And stars matter, constellations matter. I like the idea that they're tied to Greek mythology. I mean, to mythology in general, and as a way to tell stories about where we are and who we are. That's a big part of a narrative in a lot of ways. Okay, sketch layer, interesting. Let's put the lighting on a different layer. New Spider-Man movie is great. They got it right. They did. I think they did a really good job. He's the right age. They got New York right, which is really cool in a lot of ways. I thought that was really great. They didn't make the city too goofy of a character, which was interesting. I'm biased because I'm from New York, and that's a big deal to me. But yeah, no, it was wonderful. I thought that Peter Parker was great. Tom Holland did a really great job. There was just enough Marvel extended universe stuff in there to sort of tie everything together. But I loved how kind of picks up where we first met Spider-Man in the Civil War movie, which is great. Aunt May is awesome. Just some really good stuff, and I love that it's not an origin story, but it kind of is in a lot of ways. But it's really great. Did a wonderful job with that film. Cool. I don't know. I'm kind of digging just the black and white version of them, but let's see what happens if we get a little crazy in Photoshop land. Copy this image. I'm going to go back to here. I'm going to create a new document. And that's big. Make it smallish. What's really cool about working in Illustrator and Photoshop together is if you bring in, I'll show you here in a second. If you bring in art from Illustrator, you can bring it as a smart object. Why is that important? Why is that cool? Because I can, once he's in, I can go, you know what, this is great, but I really want to change my drawing. It'll take me back to Illustrator. Let me change stuff, save it, and it should play nice in Photoshop. So the updates I just made on Illustrator are now reflected in my Photoshop file. Love that. Technology doing cool technology stuff. So we have an image here that I want to play around with here. Keeps all the same properties. What I'm going to do is I'm going to paint on top of this with one of these crazy fancy Xerox brushes. What's going on here? What are you doing? Sorry guys. All right, it's catching up with me. It's on delay. So we were doing, where are you? Obviously I was going to shortcut some of the lighting ideas that we're playing with. In Photoshop, because it's just think a little easier to manage in here. Plus we're kind of short on time. So what I would do is I would consider this image to be the background that I could hand over to an animator and replicate him in that pose and bring him to life by either having the crows roost all around him like in the original sketch, or have the crows be already on him and they flutter off and reveal that character. If we wanted to make it an augmented reality poster in a lot of ways, which is what I was hoping to do with this image. Okay, let's see here. I'm trying to pick a brush. It's not letting me. I'm also kind of flying a little blind because I switched over from Photoshop. I mean, from Apple to PC. There we go. All right, so there we go. Some of that. Feels cool. Oh, sluggish, okay. All right. All I'm looking for now is I'm trying to find a balance between some of the stuff that I liked in the sketch and something that's graphically appealing. So I'm dropping in some of this business here. I like the dithered spray element because it kind of evokes a hand-printed quality, which I think is kind of cool. Why is it interesting to me? I think that's interesting because the entire thing is a very digital experience. So if we can create a piece of art that we can all walk away with that is that feels organic or handcrafted, that would be interesting. Moving this stuff around. And maybe erase some of this business right here. I don't know, maybe this guy's a little bit more sinister if we did. Let's see here. Sorry guys, I'm looking for a tool. Yes. What if we made his give him a little bit of a
Do you have another question, Albert?
Easy, bad brains. Come on now. That's what are you thinking? Even though that death documentary was wonderful, probably wouldn't be any bad brains in the US if it wasn't for that death ban that no one knew about. That's a great question. But the bad brains. Doesn't like the eraser. Interesting. see. Thanks, Sarah. Asking questions. Asking questions of our audience.
Favorite John Carpenter hero?
Snake Plissken. What? So is that like your question?
No, that would be Sully Parker's question.
Yeah. Escape from New York.
Do you think Crowboy would be a New Yorker? He's kind of got the cool New Yorker vibe.
I think he's a New Yorker. I think he's a New Yorker that's trying to deal with some issues, and he's going about it the wrong way. Yeah, I think he's got that vibe. He's got the New Yorker hoodie thing going on, and these are probably Timberland boots he's wearing, and yeah, he's got the attitude. But just he gets a chance to sort of rethink everything, which is important. How is that tied to New York? I have no idea.
Can you Mac Windows mix up?
Oh, yeah, I'm getting it all screwed up here. It's okay. It's that Windows button in the middle. I'm sure there's a good reason why they put it there, but right now it's making my life impossible. All right, let's see here. Cool. Something about the beak's not feeling 100% for me, though. That's a little better. And
Lumber, do you usually listen to podcasts, music? What are you listening to when you're going?
Oh my gosh, music. I am a Spotify person, and I've fallen in love with the Daily Mix based on just what I've been currently listening to. And actually today the new Arcade Fire album came out, so it's probably going to be playing a lot on my Spotify. I've got 2 daily mixes that are sort of comprised of my work mode. I have an old school hardcore mix, which is stuff I grew up to listening to when I was in high school. A lot of stuff from Mad Brains and all the great New York hardcore bands, and that's a big part of my listening experience. It kind of spans also all through college with how those bands turned into something that's a bit more commercial, but it's a cool list. That's my go-to work, get the stuff done mix. Then I have a hip hop mix, which is I think spawned from my Tribe Called Quest and Roots collection of music that I have on there, and that's a great mix. And then I love the Future Islands, and there's a mix that sort of feels like it's all born from that stuff. So those 3 mixes, depending on the workload for the day, get me through the day. It's a big part of stuff. Y'all listen to Spotify? You guys have favorite mixes? Are there any mixes out there I should be listening to? Anybody? Sarah, what do you like?
The way I find most music these days on Spotify is my Release Radar.
Release Radar, yes.
Yeah.
That's how I discovered, I think by accident, the daily playlist, because I would just check in. I was playing on the Release Radar, which is awesome.
So Lumber, you moved into Photoshop.
I'm in Photoshop now. Yes.
So what does this afford you?
It's a little faster to get some of the techniques I was trying to pull off in Illustrator, where I was trying to get some of the lighting to play in there. Mm-hmm. This is a little bit more immediate. Also, it lets me see if it's working, and I also like the fact that it lets me do some of this really great these rasterized effects, which means these more painterly effects. I mean, you can probably do them in Illustrator as well, but I just like the fact that this feels a little bit more natural. Like I'm messing with some tools, some traditional painting tools. And come on.
So It's a Me Katie wants to know, she's sticking with her Spider-Man theme. Any
Yes.
favorite Marvel heroes, or even DC?
I'm not a big DC fan. I think make my Marvel for sure. Spider-Man, fine. It's just they got it right. I think it's awesome. I love the Silver Surfer and Galactus and what their relationship is like and how one serves the other and for what means. I was a big X-Men fan, but after X2, the film, just kind of something's wrong, and then I've kind of lost my taste, my appetite for the X-Men. But yeah, I was a big X-Men fan. I love the Guardians of the Galaxy, what they've done with them in the movies. It's a great job. And they made me care about Iron Man and Captain America, which was kind of cool. I wasn't a big fan of the Avengers, but even though I read their books, I don't know, just not as much a fan as I was of the X-Men. But the cinematic universe did a really great job of making you care about those characters. All right, let's see here. Let's stop here with this. Oh, I see what it's doing. Shuffling my layers around. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this the basis for the layout of the poster. So we'll call this poster main art. Yeah, okay. Drop all that business in there. Go back to this dude. Turn this guy off. We might come back to you. But what I was going to do then is we need a layer to place it on. Take the Photoshop version of that character. Alright, you place it. You know what? Just to be safe, let's make it a JPEG. Let's see if we can get some designy stuff going on. Place. All right, here we go. So our main guys in here. Create a new layer. Make sure it fits the artboard. And then let's start to bring in some of the things we liked about this sketch. Specifically this border idea. What's everyone having for lunch? What are you all eating right now?
What do you want to eat if you could eat anything?
Oh, what would I love to eat? You know, we were talking about New York earlier.
Yeah.
I would love a Sicilian slice. Just enough amount of bread and dough on the bottom and just that cheese on top. I'm a big Sicilian fan. And it's got to be from the center. It's got to be right from the middle. Some people are in New York. Yeah, people like their edges and the corners of the pie. Sicilian, by the way, it's a square, heavy dough pizza. sauce and cheese on top with extra cheese on top. But they cut them into squares, and I was like getting the centerpiece of the cut because it was just cheese all the way around up to the edges. But some people like the edges. They like the corners of the cut because you get this nice hard crust from the piece. Anyway, that would be awesome. I haven't had an opportunity to have a really decent Sicilian slice since I moved away from New York. That's something I miss. So if y'all got a beat on a good Sicilian slice in Dallas, Texas, I'd be interested.
Celebrate, it's 1:10. We can go as long as you want.
I'm going to just do one quick layout thing. I don't think I'll be able to finish this poster, but this is going to become the basis for the poster that we will, I'm going to work hard to create an augmented version of. And also my software's got a lag to it. I think it's running slow. Right, so thanks for hanging out, guys. This is what the poster ultimately will be, but we'll make this prettier and a little bit more dialed in. But the idea is, if we get it done right, what I'd like to do is have you have an app that lets you point at this image, and we'll do one of two things. We'll have the crows roost over his figure and create the constellations we talked about with the eyes, or it starts that way, and then by pointing a device at it, it'll reveal this character, which is also a lot to do with the story. Kind of you're discovering the characters in the way you traverse the narrative. So yeah, and then that'll be a logo up here. I think it'd be really fun to put up there. Yeah, so there you have it for now, as far as I can get. This is really fun. I hopefully come back and able to do one where I'm not juggling two apps at one time and I got my fingers in the right buttons for working on a PC. Thank you. Talk to you soon.